All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. One of the things that I try to do with the show has always been to focus on local Winnipeg and Manitoba artists, and I often tend to stretch that wherever I can to sort of fit people in. But in this case,
Yeah.
this is the guest on this episode is someone who I didn't realize was from Winnipeg originally. So you absolutely fit the format of the show, even if you're not, currently in the province. So um, that was kind of a very exciting revelation because I got a copy of your CD from the label from the PR person, and I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. And then finding that out was kind of an extra bonus on top because you
That's
fit the
great.
format of the show. So
Thanks for having me on.
yeah, of course. I think that the best way to start this off is because you have a very lengthy history and a big, deep catalog. You've been around for quite a while playing with pretty much everyone in the Canadian jazz scene and beyond. And I think if you want to introduce yourself and give a bit of background about who you are and what you do, I think that would be a great way to start.
Sure. Well, I'm Mike Downes, and I'm mainly a bassist. I play piano. I play a little bit of drums and stuff. I play a few other. I actually played trombone for many years, but mainly known as a bassist. I'm also a composer and an arranger. Um, And I did grow up in Winnipeg. My dad was a bass player, and that's how I started on bass. So I started when I was about 8 years old,
Well,
and played around the house, listened to recordings, and learned a lot of tunes. Started a rock band, and actually had a rock band with Brad Roberts, who you probably know from the Crash Test Dummies.
I've
Him and
interviewed him.
I.
He's been on my show.
Oh, okay. So Brad and I were very, very good friends growing up, and we had a band for a number of years and we wrote music like way back when, which,
Cool.
hopefully no one ever hears this stuff because I wasn't even in puberty yet. It's pretty funny. But, but yeah, so, and then what happened was that I grew up in Winnipeg, and I moved away and studied music in university and lived in Montreal for 4 years. And then I moved to Toronto, and I've been in Toronto kind of ever since. And like you said, I've just been playing music for all those years and played with a whole bunch of international artists, whole bunch of, Canadian artists, write a lot of music, have a ton of albums out, and just I keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have this new record, the Way In, which I guess by the time this comes out as a podcast, it'll be out for the public to hear, which is awesome. But
Yeah,
I do want to talk about that record. But I guess
sure.
just leading into that, I mean, you mentioned having played in a rock band when you first started out. What was the draw to jazz for you? Like, why jazz? I mean, obviously there's a lot of different styles of jazz. It's a really umbrella genre with so many different facets. But what drew you to just kind of capital J jazz, I guess, when you
Yeah,
first started out?
yeah, no, it's a great question. And because I grew up listening to rock music, and then but my dad was a huge jazz fan, so I've heard it, from the time I was a baby. I heard
Sure.
him playing Ella Fitzgerald and Miles Davis and all that. Um, but I think what happened was that, through school, I was playing trombone. I was playing in the school jazz bands, and I kind of was doing both, and I started veering towards like listening to bass players like Jaco Pastorius, who is kind of a bridge, like a
Sure.
fusion player, kind of between rock and jazz. And I got more interested and the more I played in sort of groups that were improvising, I realized, like, hey, I love this, and I think I'm pretty good at it too. So it just felt like, I mean, I loved playing in a lot of rock bands, but I loved the freedom of improvising and like being in the moment. I think that's really what got me super into it, was just the fact that you're playing with other people, you're creating something in the moment, and it's different every time. And I just found that really exciting and gratifying.
Has that ever sort of lost its magic for you? Like, I mean, are you still motivated by the thought of being able to go out there and whether it's a recording session or a show and having that opportunity and ability to improvise and to sort of create on the fly?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I've never lost that. Like, it's kind of like being a little kid all the time. You get to try stuff, and I get to play with incredible musicians too. This is like just really top level musicians,
Yeah,
and just, and there's really something there's something really deep about getting, into that headspace and being able to like create on the spot with people who are very high level musicians. And it's just, no, it's never lost the magic for me. And that's the beauty of it. And it'll be a never ending thing until the day I die, because it's just, you never get bored.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't understand boredom.
That's a good problem to have, I think, never getting
Yeah,
bored for
yeah,
sure. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So, I mean, you have this record out, and I guess like I was looking at your discography earlier today before we did this call, and
yeah,
like I said, I alluded to at the beginning, it's pretty deep. You got a lot of, you played on a lot of people's records. You played on a lot of your own records.
yeah,
At this point in your career, when you're going to be, writing and recording new music like you have on this album,
yeah.
what are you? What is sort of your goal, I guess, as a composer, as a player at this point? I mean, you've done so much. You've had so many opportunities to play with, like you said, some of the best of the best internationally and Canadian
Hmm.
and everything
Yeah.
else.
Well, one of the things, and it's a funny thing because, like no matter how many times you put out albums and you write music and you do it all, every time it's like a unique experience. And it's, it's kind of like each one is kind of a stepping stone too.
Sure.
Um, and so, like in terms of what I'm trying to do, one of the things that I always think about is I want to be I don't want to be fake. I want to present where I'm coming from, I grew up in Winnipeg. I'm not going to there's a lot about that comes through in my music. There's a
Sure.
lot about nature that comes through in my music because I spent a lot of time outdoors. Um, and I didn't grow up in New Orleans, for example. I'm not going to try to be something I'm not,
Yeah.
but at the same time, obviously, I'm influenced by all sorts of different things, and heavily influenced by the amazing masters of jazz. But like I said, I try to always keep in mind that like I want to write something that really means something to me, that I feel it comes from my life experience, and then put that out there, and just kind of hope for the best, hope people like it.
Well, I like that you say that, because one of the things that sort of come up on this show a lot, whether I'm talking to a country artist or a rapper or a jazz player, whatever it
Yeah.
is the idea of, especially, I don't know if it's especially in Winnipeg, but it seems like there's a very strong, people have a good bullshit detector. When people recognize that something is not genuine and doesn't have that authenticity, and is not someone sort of writing from their own experience, from their own values, their own viewpoint, it gets ferreted out pretty quickly, I think, in this city, and I'm sure elsewhere as well. So I guess like this comes up a lot with hip hop. I think that I've seen a lot of rappers that in Winnipeg that try to
Hmm.
sound like they're from New York or LA or wherever else, and it doesn't
Right.
come across
Right.
as genuine. When you have someone rapping in a prairie accent talking about something that's very Manitoba specific, that, I mean, it's maybe a little cornier than the guy trying to be from New York, but it has that realness to it. So, doing an instrumental style of music, how do you portray that authenticity with a bass? I mean, obviously with vocal music it's more clear because the lyrics will directly refer to that. So what is it that you're doing that you think sort of portrays that genuineness, that personality, I guess, on an instrument?
What a great question. I gotta
Thanks.
think about that now. No, it's great. It's a great question because you're right. Like a lyric is very obvious, right? Like, and it sort of situates something very
Yeah.
quickly. But I think it has to do with trying to jazz is very broad, right? And there's like improvised music. There's a lot of ways to approach it. And I think in terms of authenticity, like for example, if you try to play a certain period of jazz, like, if you say, well, I only like jazz between, 1955 and 1962, and that's kind of where I'm going to situate myself, then you have to sort of model it after a certain thing. But I think so in terms of instrumental music, I think what I do is like, for example, on this new record, I have a tune called Crimson, and it's kind of my homage to the group King Crimson, a
Cool.
progressive rock band. So they're not real, I don't know if they're really considered a jazz group. They're more like a prog rock group. So, but I'm not shy to do that because that's what I was listening to as a kid. So I don't shy away from just kind of letting every bit of music that I hear. It doesn't even matter if it's country music or what it might be. I let it all kind of absorb it all. And then just, from my experience again, I write what I write. And obviously I have filters for that,
Sure.
but at the same time, I don't try to filter out life experiences I've had and the things that I enjoy. So yeah, I think part of the authenticity comes from not trying to replicate something from a specific period or whatever, or you just kind of saying, well, this is my take on this.
Right. So
Yeah.
with that track, I guess, for example, then I mean, having that King Crimson influence, is that something that was sort of obvious to you as you were putting the track together, or is it something that you heard after the fact, after you'd played this, you realized that maybe this is where it's coming from, or was it very much, I'm thinking King Crimson, this is what the song is like?
Yeah, you know what? No, it was there from the time I started writing the tune. There's a tune called "Frame by Frame" by on Discipline on the King Crimson album, and like the tune didn't come out anything like that. You'd listen to them and you go, no, it doesn't sound anything like that. But it was kind of the inspiration, like that. In fact, that Discipline album was kind of the inspiration, especially. And I sort of like many times I sort of start off with an idea and it's the springboard, but it
Sure.
really doesn't end up being, it's not, certainly not a King Crimson tune. You know what I mean? Like, but it was the impetus for it, and it was there from the beginning. Yeah, of that one.
Do you think that that's I mean, like you said, it's not they weren't like a jazz group. I mean, there's the prog elements, and there's definitely some connection there. But I mean, if
Yeah.
someone sees the song title Crimson, do you think that there is people might make the connection, or is it too sort of too many steps away from the process of hearing the original thing and then filtering it through your own sound and your own experience?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, and it doesn't really matter.
Of
Like,
course, yeah,
if somebody came to me and said, at some point goes, hey, like I can see where you got that from. I'd be very impressed. you know, yeah. So but yeah, it doesn't. It's not. I'm not too worried about it. I'll let listeners sort of think what they think, and
yeah, for sure. So with this with the album release, do you? I mean, we're in this weird era, this is dystopian future where the way that records are released and promoted and all of this stuff is so different than it was even 10, 15 years ago. And I mean, obviously very different than it was going back further.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah,
What
yeah.
is it like for you in 2024 to be putting on an album? I mean, like logistically and and like emotionally, like the whole process of it. What is it like in this futuristic internet era for you to release something like this? Does it have the same feel as it did sort of in the before times, I guess if you want to call it that?
Yeah, you ask great questions. Thanks
Thanks.
for this. It's a really interesting thing. Like, if I think about there's a lot of weird ways to approach the answer to that.
Sure.
Because like my first album was called Forces, and that was back in the mid '90s, and at the time I remember paying like tons of money. Like the studios actually cost more at that time than they do now.
Sure.
Musician fees were probably about the same, which is really a sad thing, but that's for another day. you know, and then the artwork was like really expensive. I had a photographer come and do that, that stuff. And then the artwork was something that was really, like he had to have like this somebody who worked in that field to
Yeah.
do the artwork. There was no way you could possibly do that yourself. And so one of the interesting things about, from just that perspective now is like I can basically do everything. Like, actually my wife does all the my album artwork and she's
Okay.
great at it, like she does awesome work, but it's kind of cool. It's like in-house. So, and I don't have to, I don't have to pay thousands of dollars for a photo shoot and, et cetera, et cetera. So it's actually kind of, in some ways it's easier to put out music. Now the other side of this though, and I'm sure you know this because, you hear all these new artists coming, like there's just an unbelievable amount of music coming out
Yeah.
constantly. right? Like, so that's something that's a little bit different too. It's just, it's the age of anyone being able to upload anything from anywhere in the world. And, it's quite astounding, now, and it's quite like overwhelming the amount of stuff out there. So those, all those factors come into play. But it's still in the end, it's kind of the same process where, you do some soul searching, you write some music, you put it out there and you do your best. And, you want to be really proud of the music that you create. And so, yeah, so I mean, it kind of in that way, there is no difference, but there are like, as the world has changed a lot and there are
Yeah.
lots of differences. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that the whole idea of just the quantity of music being released, because that,
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, that definitely is it's a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's great that the bar has been lowered to access for so many people to create and do it without spending all that money and being able to, put it out there in the world if they otherwise there would have been too many barriers. But then there's the second issue of how do you then get your record heard above all 7,000 records that were released in the past 5 minutes. And I guess
No, exactly.
I guess in your case you have the benefit of having a long career, having name recognition. But I mean, what is that like for you now? Just the idea of getting your record out there to the people who should hear it. I mean, is that more of a challenge than it used to be, or do you feel that is jazz insular enough that it's
Well,
more direct?
like I mean, the jazz music. I watched this Rick Beato episode. Rick
Yeah,
from YouTube,
yeah, I've seen
and
those.
he
Yeah,
was talking about the sort of different type genres of music and their popularity. And jazz didn't even make it on his list. It wasn't even like I forget what was there was something 3%, and jazz wasn't even on there. So it's a pretty small thing, and there's a lot of great artists. I mean, like you said, the beauty of this is that there's incredible musicians worldwide and you
yeah,
can hear what they're up to and it's fantastic. You just got to do a lot of filtering, so for me, yeah, it's, I still, as you said, I hired Orange Grove Publicity to help, with the sort of getting the word out. And, cause it's very hard for an artist to manage that. Like I can only go so far. I might be able to, do a lot of things in house and everything, but there's certain things I just, I want to concentrate on the musical stuff
of
more
course,
than,
yeah,
all that stuff. So, you do your best, social media and stuff. And I just try to get the word out. And you're right. I have the benefit of having sort of established a pretty strong name in Canada. So, I'm at least pretty well known, and I'm known outside of the borders as well. So that's
sure,
good. Yeah.
yeah, that definitely helps.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
if someone's listening to the show, because I mean, I've been doing this for more than a decade now, and the variety of genres I cover is pretty wide.
Yeah.
If someone's hearing you for the first time on the show and they want to know more about what you do, um, how would you define the sound on this record? I mean, in the most layman's terms possible for someone who may not be, deep into jazz.
Well, okay. One of the things that's unique about this record is there's no drummer on it. And like I've, most pretty well everything else I've recorded except for a solo bass record that I put out before this
Yeah.
has had a drummer on it. And this one has guest percussionists, as you know, but not on every track. So some of it is just trio. So I would kind of classify it as almost like chamber music, like chamber jazz,
Okay.
like chamber music jazz. Kind of like a cross between chamber music and jazz, and kind of very subtle and nuanced, I think is one way I would put it. And I think, like more of a contemporary type of jazz music, but like I said, kind of thinking of it like chamber music almost.
Okay. That's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, it's funny because the drum thing, when I was listening to the record, I didn't notice it at first, and then a few
Right.
songs in, it was like, wait a minute, there's no drums here. I looked at the credits, and there's, like you
Yeah.
said, percussion, but no drums.
Yeah.
Was that I mean, obviously that was a deliberate choice, but what was the reason behind that? Why avoid drums, which are typically like you said on every other recording that you have out there, it's usually a drummer.
Yeah, on this one, I just felt like, well, the musicians on it, Robbie Botosh is an incredible piano player, incredible keyboard player, and Ted Quinlan, same thing as a guitar player, is one of the best in the world. They're both some of the best musicians in the world. And there's something about our musical connection. We've been playing together for like well over 20 years, all of us. So that core trio, I just thought, and sometimes, okay, I'm a bass player. So sometimes, with drums, the bass can get a little bit like not lost in the mix, but it can kind of, be sort of backgroundish. And I wanted to feature the nuances of our musical connection, like this really deep musical connection. And I felt without drums that we could get that across in a clearer way, I guess. So that was part of the conception of that.
Listening back to it, do you feel like that you achieved that connection is kind of on a showcase?
Oh yeah. I feel it. Yeah. I mean, I'm really proud of the recording of what we ended up getting. And a lot of the stuff you hear there, you might think, oh, they worked out that ending, but we didn't, like a lot of that stuff is just improvised. I mean, a lot of the tunes are composed, and
Yeah,
I thought about them in a way that I could present this, even just a trio, make it sound much bigger than a trio, with kind of some, just the way I use the instruments and stuff like that. But I think in the end, what comes across is that connection and sort of the way we're able to improvise and kind of follow each other and almost like, telepathically know where we're going,
cool.
so.
And then I guess that comes from playing together for so long too, right? You have that sort of innate connection that you know what each other are going to do and how you're going to sort of move forward with the song.
Yeah, you start to sort of sense things, with having played with somebody for a long period of time, and that's the thing is we don't really have to say too much, and we can sort of find this really great sort of musical ground together.
That's awesome. So if people are hearing you for the first time and they want to hear the music, what's the best way to find this album and also find like a lot of the other stuff in your lengthy catalog?
Well, I mean, I'm on all the streaming sites, so whether you listen to Apple Music or Spotify or Tidal or whatever, like all my music is on all of those streaming sites. So it's Mike Downes, Downes, and most of my social media handles are Mike Downes Music. So if you go on Instagram, it's Mike Downes Music, and same thing on my artist page for Facebook, and so on and so forth, on YouTube as well. So you can check that out. You can also go to my website, which is mikedownes.com. And so I've got my stuff there. I have my music on Bandcamp. It's kind of just Google my name and bass and Mike
It'll show
Downes
up.
music, and hopefully you can find all that stuff.
Awesome.